Alright, so, tutorial time. Gonna show you guys how I make my animated videos. This is what works for me, might not work for you, but this is how I make my animations. I'm gonna go through the process. I'm not gonna go into too much detail with every little step, but I'm gonna show a general overview of going from idea to storyboard to assets to animation to the final video. So obviously, you saw the intro, you saw the little video at the beginning, but how do you start if you have nothing to go from? Well, you need an idea. And when you're first doing your idea, it's a good idea to get into your drawing program, Paint Tool Sci, open it up, set it to 1080p by 1920p. That's the resolution for a 1080p YouTube video. I like to make it a little larger, like 1930, 1940, so that there's a little bit of room, a little bit of wiggle room. And then you're just going to want to, here I have my references. There's my character, Veronica. She's got the weird pink-purple skin. And you just start, you start off figuring out what you're going to do. Now, I knew from the beginning I wanted to have her, like, rubbing her stomach and all that stuff. So, all you got to do is start sketching. And here's the little doodle I did. You just, doodle it up. And from there, there's put it on a layer. You got all these different layers. I'll get into that a little later. But you have your sketch. I got another layer below, that's her chair. So having it all in separate layers helps with copy, pasting, and animation. But there's a background, that's a chair, that's her. All those layers are the actual storyboard frames. Now down here, that's the first shot. Just a little sketch. Same with the next one. And you can see it's pretty simple to, plan out. And there it is again. A little drawn. Now from here, once you have your initial sketches, you want to start editing them. And as you can see, I'm copy pasting all these frames. They have her hand moving. Goes down, slaps her stomach. Comes back up. There's her stomach jiggling around. I'm recording this after the fact, by the way. And there goes her hand moving around. And all that is copying, pasting that initial sketch and making little edits to it. And that's all there is to it for a storyboard like this. You just sketch it out and you get an idea of what you're doing. You're not looking to make it perfect, but it's a good idea to just get the drawings down. From there, you would export each of the layers as an image. You can do that all in a big batch. I'll show you how to do that later. But just, export it, and then you're going to want to import all that stuff to Adobe Premiere. You just import it, and you're going to have your big old thing. There's all the assets. Now, because I exported them transparent, I need like a little white one at the bottom so that they all show up. You see how they're all black in the top left corner? So that's what's going on at the timeline on the bottom, that big purple series of bars. Like, you have this white one at the bottom, you have the actual black lines on top of that, and at the very top there's a dark purple one, which is set on, what did I set it as? Like right there. And that makes the lines darker, because they were a little pale gray, now they're a darker purple. And all you do is, you put the little drawings you did in order. Very simple, very straightforward. You have to go in and you're going to have to shorten all the clips to all the drawings rather. They'll initially be put in there at 5 seconds long. Put them down to a couple frames and just, put them in there, copy paste, move it around, and all you're doing is getting an idea for the timing and the spacing of the animation. So, just going in, you can see there, you can just shorten it, pull it down, pop it where it needs to go. Very straightforward. Now from there, you just, check it, making sure it looks good. There it goes, slap. And right now I'm seeing an issue. Her arm doesn't come up enough for my liking. So now that I have it here, I can see it. I can visualize it. I know that when I actually go do the animation, I have her arm come up more. It doesn't seem powerful enough to me. And there's the little ending. Go through the whole thing. And that's how you do the storyboard. There's not much else to it. You just draw and you put the drawings in a sequence. It's not that complicated for something like this. And obviously you can do much more. And we're going to get into that much more later. Because obviously this is just the beginning. And if you don't have Adobe Premiere but you still want to animate, you can do it in a thing like gifmaker.me. This site's great. You just plug in the images that you want and it'll make it into a GIF. And it's great for storyboarding. Just be sure to put it in the correct order. I'm doing it backwards because I'm, just lazy. Just showing how it works. And also you're going to want the drawings to not be transparent, because otherwise it looks weird. So have it be, opaque, white background. And you can put it in here and you can make it faster, slower, same thing. But a little more accessible if you want to do a really simple animation but you don't have Adobe Premiere. Pretty straightforward. And then over here you can see you can make a GIF. You can even make a video out of it, but it's not going to have audio or anything. So now once you have your storyboard, you're going to have to draw the assets. Now I went ahead and drew them all before. You're not going to see me drawing all of them, but again, it's pretty straightforward. You're just drawing each little bit. The thing that's interesting about it is how you're going to have different chunks. You're not just drawing the whole doodle. You're drawing the individual arms and whatnot. There's the individual chair. There's the individual background. There's the desk. And you're just doing the whole thing in little chunks. And I'll get more into that a little later. There's her hair, there's her head, there's her eyes. There's her eyes blinking, blink. There's her mouth sort of tightening. And then from there, there's her arm, there's her torso, there's her chest, there's her little neck thing. And you see how it all fits together. But you want it to be on separate layers so that it can all move independently of one another. There's her legs, her stomach. She's got a bunch of stomachs for when it's wobbling around. There's a little shine on top of the stomach. Easy to put on a separate layer instead of doing it all on each individual stomach asset. There's her legs. Pretty straightforward. Just drawing her arms, hand, forearm, and there's her different hands. And this is about it. This is about all you need to do the animation. This saves you so much time. And it's good for stuff like this where there's a lot of subtle jiggling, where there isn't so much these big sweeping movements or like a walk cycle. The appeal is just having her body kind of bob around. So, just showing you everything. And then down here are the other assets. There's the background. There's the other background. And you can see how there's these other shots. But they don't really have any assets to them. Just one or two is enough to convey a little bit of movement or personality. So I like to pad out my videos with some of these simple shots. They make them pretty straightforward. Now, when you're actually drawing an asset, you may be wondering, what's the most efficient way to draw all these little parts? Because maybe when you're doing a full drawing that you really care about getting all the details down, you're going to take much longer. But with something as simple as those hands or that arm or her hair, all you do is obviously you have the initial sketch. Like here I'm going to sketch up a little character face so you understand what I'm talking about. There's her face, little hair. I'm going to make it a little bigger. There we go. So you would have your sketch, obviously, from the storyboard. But the most efficient way to do the line art and the coloring is this. Make a new layer on top of the sketch, get your stuff set to black or whatever color you like. Then you get a nice, you're going to want to get a pen tool that's nice and thick and dark and solid. See how that is? Yeah, that's good. You're going to want to get that and just, you can go up here to the stabilizer, set it on the max setting, and you can get nice smooth lines that way. See how it lags behind my mouse and it's more slow. It's just like really solid. So you go and you drop your thing. Very simple. Just boom. Do the whole thing. Right there. And from there, you do all the little details. Nothing much to it. You just do that for the whole thing, being very careful to make sure that there's no gaps for color to leak through. You want everything to be connected, at least on the outside, because what you're going to do is you're going to get the little magic wand tool here, and you're going to select the whole outside. Then you go to selection. You see how it's like nice and tight around the outside. Selection, inverse, bam. So now the whole inside is selected. You can delete the sketch at this point or make a new layer. Make a new layer and get your colors and boom. Real simple. You don't have to, worry about it too much. You don't got to do it manually. You can just really quickly fill in the entire thing. Then from there you turn on preserve opacity, which makes it so that everything that you previously filled in, only that stays filled in. So then you just go in and you just color it in. Real simple, real quick. I'm being kind of sloppy. You would take your time a little more. But you see how it's been like 2 minutes and we have an asset now. It's not pretty looking, but it's there. And that is pretty much it. And you would do this for all the hands, all the eyes. Depending on your shot, you might have like 10 assets, you might have 2 assets, you might have 20 assets. You can also do the preserve opacity thing for the lines themselves and make them look a little nicer. You see how bright that looks now? Real simple. And that's pretty much it for the drawing portion. You would just do this sort of thing for all of the assets that you need. And you want to make sure that you have all the parts that you think are going to need to be independent from one another. You draw them independent from one another. So just I would err on the side of caution and do more than you think you need to. But also, obviously, after you do a handful of animations, you're going to know what needs to be independent and what doesn't need to be independent. Like for this, I know that her hair pretty much doesn't need to be 2 different parts. Just the main hair and like her back hair. Like the top of her head and the back of her head. I don't need to like have the individual little pieces in front of her face be independent because her head isn't going to be moving that much. Even though if her head was moving a lot, it might be better to do that. Now what you're going to want to do to export all of these layers is save it as a Photoshop file. Or rather, export a copy of it as a Photoshop file. This way you don't have to go in and do every layer export as an image. Because in Photoshop, what you can do is you can go up to the scripts. Anyway, you go to scripts, and then you go to export layers as files. And from there, you give it a little name. I already have a name set up. It's like Veronica Assets or whatever. You want to make sure it goes into a file. I made a file specifically for these assets. There it is, assets. Underneath the Veronica tutorial animation. From there, all you gotta do, you gotta make sure you do this. You want it to be set so that, yeah, there's the name. You want it to be set so that it's transparent, but you do not want to trim the layers. You want everything to be the same place that was. If you trim the layers, then all the tiny things are going to be these tiny little images that are going to show up in the middle of the frame instead of where you drew them. So like the eyes will be in the middle instead of being on her face. So just keep that on, keep that off rather, and then you'll run the program and bam, you'll have all your assets. Here they are. And you can see that that's a lot of images. And if you're doing a whole like 2-3 minute long video, you'd have even more. So you want to just keep it simple. And you can see scrolling through these, all the different little drawings, all the places where there's different things. And if that was all connected, then it wouldn't be able to move as much. So all these little bits and bobs, all the backgrounds. And you see, if I go through this kind of quickly, how it all kind of fits together. You get an idea of how it works, even just at this simple stage. Now, once you have all your assets, you're going to want to import them into Premiere, just like you did the storyboards. I put a new folder for all the different assets. You can see the storyboard one up there. That's the assets we're going to need. We don't need those anymore. We need these. So just select them, open them, pop them in the folder. Real simple. Oh, there they all are. All of them right there. You can see them in the little top left corner. Everything's right where it should be. It might be in like a reverse order. Don't worry about it too much. You can find them just by looking at them. From there, you're going to want to make a new sequence. Now, this is how you would also do the storyboard. I didn't go into too much detail there. But you want a new sequence. There we go. We're going to call this one Veronica Animation. Settings 1920 1080p, 24 frames per second. You're going to want to be square pixels. That means that it's like a one-to-one thing with your images. Anything other than square pixels is pretty much for like cameras that might have like a different resolution. So if you want it to be 1080p, 1920p, whatever, it's got to be square pixels. Yeah, all that stuff is for like video footage. Anything with animation should be square pixels, or else it's going to come out looking kind of skewed. The ratio just isn't going to be right. Alright, so now you make it up, and there is your timeline. And you're going to have to start placing your stuff in there. But where do you start? Well, you have that storyboard video, right? Go pull that up. Storyboard. Right there. In it goes, and you just pull that in, and you're going to place everything on top of that. And it's going to be your blueprint. Now, obviously, you have all these assets. You're going to need to increase the amount of layers you have. It's not all going to fit on those 2 layers. So, just add more layers. We're going to add a bunch of them. I'm going to have to add more later. I think in the end I used like 25 layers. And it's good to use a high number because then you can put little breaks in between the assets so you don't get lost. Because there's not really a way to differentiate the layers. I think you can color them different colors, but it's not really that useful. So there's all the layers. From there, you're just going to start grabbing your assets. Save first, of course, though. You want to save it. Now, grab yourself your bits and bobs. See? And just start clipping them down. Making them fit. It goes up to there. We're going to put the little stylus there and drag it to the stylus. There's a little magnet tool that's really useful. You might see it underneath the little yellow timer on the left of the timeline. There's that little magnet looking thing on top of the video files, like the video layers. If you have that clicked on, everything will snap together. Here it all goes. In it goes. Whoop. There. Whoop. There we go. So all the backgrounds are done for these bits. Now we're going to get into how this is going to work. How is the animation itself going to work? How is that going to be a thing? Like, yeah, we have all these parts, but how do we move them around to make all that jiggling and the hands moving? It seems like it would be a very tedious thing. And it is. It is very tedious, but it isn't that hard to do. Once you get the ball rolling, you can kind of get through it. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to use tweening. And tweening is basically... Well, tweening, we'll get into that a little later. What we're going to be using is keyframes. And keyframes is what's used in tweening. Now, what a keyframe is, you see this big ball here, her stomach. We're going to move that around. And the way we move it around within the video is with keyframes. So, here we are, squared up at the beginning of the shot. There's her stomach. And we're going to make a keyframe for its... I think I start with the position. Yep. Click that little keyframe. Bam. See that little diamond there? Then we're going to go to the end of the shot, and we're going to move it all the way over here. This is just to show you what it does. This isn't obviously going to be in the final video. And bop. It goes right along that line we made. Very simple. And with this same thing, we can make it move. We can make it move up. We can make it move down. We can, like, make it move in all sorts of crazy directions. You see that piece in the middle? It goes there, and then it goes up there. It's very tedious to do a whole thing this way, but it's so... It just makes sense. Once you start doing it, it makes so much sense. You can also make the thing grow. We click the scale one there. We're going to make it bigger. Bigger than that. We're going to move it too. See? It can grow. So it can move, it can grow. It can do all kinds of things. We can change its opacity. We can make it rotate. We can do all sorts of things. So let's try a rotation. Same thing. Make it rotate however many degrees. There we go. Bam. Like a door. And of course, the big thing that we need to worry about, here's the opacity too. Make it like, 0, 10, whatever. Fades in and out. All this stuff, very obvious. But the big thing is that you can do all this stuff at the same time. You can make it grow, rotate, shrink, fade in, fade out. And you can even layer more on top of that if you go and get the transform effect in the bottom left where you have all those effects, the very bottom left. You can get a transform effect and put it on here and do 2 things at once. So you can have it like grow, shrink, move, and then grow, shrink, and move some more. It's very, very good. And by doing this to all the assets, you can do the whole thing. Yeah, see that transform effect right there? You can do even more. There's not really a good way of explaining how it works. You just have to play around with it. And that's kind of what this whole thing is. This whole tutorial is me showing you where to go to find the toys, and then you go and play with those toys. So, for the actual animation, all this is going to do is like breathe in and out a little bit. It's not going to move around too much. So we're just going to have it go back. Going to set that keyframe, copy it, paste it at the end. So now it's sort of locked in that's the location where it's going to be. And then in the middle, we're going to have it breathe out. We're going to have that little stomach there come out. Just move it a little bit, and there, very simple. Comes in, comes out. Now it's kind of sharp. It just sort of comes in and then immediately goes out. And we want to kind of weave, kind of bob in and out. So you can do that a bunch of different ways. I'm not sure exactly how I went about it. I think I just copied the bits. There, copy. Move it 1 frame over, to maybe 2. paste, and now it will pause on that sort of high point a little longer. So now it's you know, it pauses it doesn't just immediately switch to going back in. We can also do this, which is you set some keyframes in the middle right there, and then you move it to the right a little bit, and then you drag it. You drag that already pre-existing keyframe to the left that you just made. And by doing that, you essentially slow down the animation where it changes, and you speed it up in the middle where it would be the most quick. So now it'll sort of, yeah, you see that there? That's like a more detailed way of looking at it. It goes in, then it goes out, then it goes in, then it goes out. It doesn't just cut, it kind of slowly creeps in there. This is very complicated stuff, this part. I wouldn't worry about doing this kind of stuff if you're just starting out, but it's very tactile. It makes sense. It's like you're stretching it a little bit. I don't really know how to explain it properly, but you know, you'll figure it out if you're playing around with this sort of thing. So there's our belly. There it is moving around. Perfect. No problems. From there, you have the whole shebang. You have her sat in her chair and her belly moving and all that stuff. So we gotta get that chair in there. Gotta get the desk in there. Gotta get her hair in there. Just gonna speed this up real quick. Bam, bam, bam. In goes every little bit. And layer it up. And you see how there's like those pauses, those breaks between the stacks of layers? That way you don't get lost. So all of like her face and mouth and eyes are on a layer, and all of her hands are on a layer. And obviously it's not all of the eyes and all of the hands, because there's no reason to stack like 3 eyes on top of each other. But all of the facial features are grouped together, all of the arms are grouped together, and obviously it's layered properly so that the things that are meant to be in the back are in the back, and the things that are meant to be in the front are in the front. So just, you know, get it all in there and stretch it out to be the length of the actual shot. So the way this works is that she's gonna slap her stomach and give it a rub, and then that's gonna loop like 3 times. So we're just gonna focus on this little like 10-second, 8-second chunk where she's doing the movement, and then we'll copy paste everything at the end. I'm not entirely sure where I start. I think I start with the hands. Yeah, you can see. Yes. In order to make sure you don't grab the layers you don't want to move, you should lock them all down except for the layer that you're working on. There's a little lock and a little eyeball tool that you can use to get that all situated. Now what I've done here is I've put the storyboard on top, and I've lowered the opacity so it again can act sort of like a guide. So it's only like on 10% opacity, right on top. You can see where it's moving and all that stuff. That's where her hand starts moving. And then from there, we're going to set a keyframe for the position where it starts. Come on. Bam. And we're going to do it for the position and the rotation, because the hand comes up and rotates around and it moves. So we're going to skip ahead to where her hand comes all the way up when she's ready to smack her stomach. And we're going to move it. Rotate it and then drag it up. Except you may be able to tell that there's going to be a problem already. Yeah, you see that? You see how the arm's kind of like breaking? Because it's not rotating on the elbow. It's rotating in the middle of the frame. Now, how do we fix that? All you gotta do, it's pretty straightforward, is you have to change the... What is it called? You see that little circle in the middle? That's the anchor point. You're going to want to change that so that it's on the elbow. At least for this. For the other assets, it's not important. But for something that moves in such a two-dimensional up and down arm kind of way as this, you're going to want to change the anchor point. So just go over to the anchor point and drag the numbers. You can put in specific numbers, but you can just drag them like that and put it right on the elbow. And then from there, just put it back where it belonged. There it is. Very straightforward. From there, all you're going to do is, try it again. Up goes the arm. There, much better. Look at how nice that looks. Move it a little bit, fine-tune it. But, there it is. Now, this is a tricky thing. You might be wondering, what the hell is my mouse doing? I'm like grabbing these little yellow bits and it's making a arc. The hell's going up with that? Well, that's another way to have the movement kind of come in and out slowly. So it kind of comes up slow and then bum. It's not that... Actually, I realize now, remember this now. I'm doing this on the wrong asset. This is on the movement. It should be on the rotation. I'll figure that out later. Point is that by playing around with these little yellow bits, when you open up the menu underneath a particular action, these little bits here, this can make things move in a more smooth manner. At least if it's moving in a way where you want to sort of accelerate and decelerate, it's good for that. It's really finicky. There's no way for me to explain exactly how to use it. Just play around with it and you'll figure it out. This is very slow and tedious because it's just like, it's like whittling. You're just slowly fine-tuning things until it all comes together. Alright, so now, hopefully we're going to get into making her arm move down. We're going to set in our keyframe so her arm pauses while it's up there. See how we're like making it stay up there? And now, we're going to make it come down. Boom. Down comes her arm. It's rotated down however many degrees that is. And we're just going to do the same thing. We're going to fine tune it. It needs to like bounce. It needs to come up. And you can hopefully see by the amount of keyframes that there are here on the little rotation thing that this isn't that like one-to-one if you want it to look good. If you want to like bounce, if you want to have anticipation, if you want her hand to like rear back a little bit before it comes down, you're going to need to like play with it a bit. But as you can also see, all of the keyframes are pretty close to one another. So we're talking like going forward like 2 or 3 frames and then making a little tiny, having her arm rotate like 1 more degree and then going forward. It's not that complicated. It's just very dry. Alright, so here we are. Took a while, but we have her arm pretty much done. We have the slapping, and here we are figuring out the rubbing at the end. Same basic principle, just moving things around. And you can see I'm doing more of those like arches, but you don't have to worry about that too much. It just makes things look a little smoother on my end. Playing around with the rotation, and should be able to show you the full thing in just a minute. You can see here just how much it like moves. All the little bits and bobs that we did. All the little individual rotations and the positions and all these little movements. It's not super tricky, but it is very tedious. Again, it's like whittling. The individual motions themselves are not hard, but the amount of them can be intimidating. However, this is pretty much... This and her slapping her stomach, like her stomach wobbling around, is pretty much all the animation that exists here. So once you get those done, you can copy paste them onto the other assets, and you're good to go. So this is like 50%, this is like 30% of the animation work done right here. And I'm going to show you that in a bit. Frame by frame, you see how it moves. There it goes. Gives a little rub. Perfect, no problems. Very straightforward. See the whole thing up there. And it might seem like a lot, but it's really very straightforward. Now, we're going to copy and paste the entire thing. You saw what I was doing there? Copy, paste. Bam. Copy, click the motion, the little motion thing at the top of the video effects. Save it, copy it, and then paste it. You don't save it. You just copy and paste it onto the next thing. In this case, it's her hand. See how her hand's moving around? It's going right along with it like it's part of it. And that's really what you're looking for. So now that we did the arm, the hand, it's simple. Same thing. It's the exact same thing. You just copy paste it. Don't even have to think about it. The only thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to have the hand lag behind the arm just a little bit. You go up to the part that you want right there, that initial movement, and you just move it one frame to the right. And then you pick up the whole thing, you drag it, you grab it, and you move it to the right once. That way it's one frame behind, and you see how it kind of like bobs around? It looks a lot more natural. It doesn't look like it's just stiff and attached to the arm. And it would be even better if you could have it rotate in a way that makes it lag behind. I'm not going to bother with that because you would basically have to animate the whole thing from scratch anyway. Because of where the anchor point is, it's not on the wrist, it's on the elbow. So I'm not going to bother with that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the other hands. Now this is a very important skill because this is how you do blinking. This is how you do lip syncing. You have to copy paste the same movement from one thing onto the other. So now you see those other hand assets, that one where her hand is up. Just copy paste the same thing, the same movement right on top. And you have to make sure that you're copying the actual motion information instead of copying the keyframes, because otherwise it won't sync up. And obviously everything has to be the same length. You're going to take the razor blade tool on the bottom right, and you're going to go right to where you want it to be. Then you move over, and it should stop being the raised hand there. And it should start being the raised hand again, right about there. And it should stop right there. So we'll cut it, then we'll delete the bits we don't want. And there it is. You can see how it appears and disappears. Perfect. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get the mediator. There is another... I'm just adding another layer here. There's the other hand asset that isn't the raised hand, it's kind of the in-between. Grab that one, and we're going to do the same thing. There's a couple of them, actually. Let's do the smacky hand first. Her hand only smacks down like that for a couple frames, so that'll be easy enough to do. Boom, right there. So, same thing. Gonna just cut. Put a couple frames more. Yeah, that's fine. Boom. Cut. Delete. Delete. And we can move it down to make things nice and tidy. Bam. Real simple. Now you can see that the hands are layered on top of each other. The reason for that is because we want to keep the thing that we're copying and pasting from to be whole. We don't want to cut it up because that might mess with the pasting process. It might think that like, oh, well that thing is broken now, so we can't paste it properly. But anyway, we're gonna just cut the little median hands here. Do the same thing, cut, 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 cut. Just a couple frames of them to act as an in-between. There it goes. That's good. Delete. Just press the delete key on your keyboard right above the arrow keys. Move it down. That looks good. And we can move the whole thing down now, and it will automatically trim out the bits from the lower layer we don't want. So if we give this a play now, see the hands? Perfect. The only thing that's wrong is that there's no jiggle. There's no jiggle, her elbows aren't moving. We're going to have to do all that. It's not going to take that long. We're going to fine tune this a little bit, just going to move the hands around a little bit. That smacking motion could be a little more extreme. I'm just going to skip ahead past that. It's not that complicated. You know what I'm doing. I'm just moving stuff around. Okay, so as you can see, I took the liberty of playing around with her arms and fixing her arms, and we're going to move into the more important part, because there's no reason for me to show you an hour of me playing with her arms. We're going to move into scaling. We're going to move into growing her stomach up and down and making it jiggle. You're going to want to turn off that little thing here, uniform scale. That way you can move those two things independently of one another. You can do the growing on a horizontal or vertical scale. So, we need her stomach to jiggle when she smacks it. We're going to do the same thing with the arms. We're going to set keyframes for right before and when it gets smacked. Alright, so when her hand lifts away from her stomach, we're going to make it move a little bit. It's going to move just a little bit, and then when her hand comes down and smacks it, it's going to move a lot. And when she smacks it, it's going to move out and down, and then it's going to bounce back up and in, and it's going to bounce around a lot. And that's essentially what we're going to be doing. We're just going to be doing up and down and up and down. And it's going to be tedious, but it's the same thing like the arm, and even more so than the arm. We can copy-paste the jiggle and apply it to other parts of her body. So her chest is going to jiggle, her legs and arms and her head and the seat that she sat on. All that stuff's going to wobble around. So we have the initial sort of stomach movement. It's not really necessary, but I'm just a little bit of a perfectionist in this regard. It's going to grow, it's going to move, and it's also going to move its position. So you need both of the scales, scale height, scale width, you need those keyframed, and you need the actual position to be keyframed. So here we are. Our stomach's getting smacked. Bam. Needs to be a lot more than that. But remember, we drew all those different stomach assets, so those are going to get copy pasted in here instead of just her plain old stomach. Alright, bam. Down goes her hand, and we're gonna, this is where the jiggling starts. That group of like 4 keyframes on those 3 rows. Real simple, just gotta like make sure it looks good. There, looks about right. From there, we're gonna have it go up. So we'll make it come up, we'll make it skinnier and taller, and we're gonna speed through all this. Gonna just speed up a bit. And we're gonna do the same thing over here. It's gonna get shorter, then taller, then shorter, then taller. And we're gonna go ahead and just play around with this. And you can see that it's just the same thing over and over again. Each time I'm making the variables by which they move a little less. And at the end I'm gonna like space them out a little more so that it slows down and becomes less frantic as the jiggling goes on. Pretty basic. I keep saying that everything's basic, but it really is. Like, I think you can see that it's just very tactile. It's just sort of like a thing where you know what you see is what you get, basically. And yeah, here you can see it's coming along and it's getting more low. Very straightforward. And now we're not even in the jiggle anymore. Now we're just doing her rubbing her stomach, which moves around a little bit as well, but not by much. You can see how her hand kind of pushes it around. Gotta make that all sync up, and that's the main thing there. So here it is. She brings up her hand, smack, and it jiggles. And then she rubs and it moves around a little bit. Not too shabby. So what we're going to do now, if I'm not mistaken, is we're going to put in the new assets. We're going to put in all the belly bits. So, let's move this down. Going to move this up so that we have more space. Because we have plenty of layers, we don't got to add any more. We just got to move them around. Put all those on lock, and here is the stomach layer. Going to move it down. We're going to copy it. Copy the motion, that is. And we're going to get... There's her other stomach, the one that's all flat and flabby. That's meant to be slapped. And boom. Look at how good that looks. It's just a real hearty smack. So we're going to cut this, just like we did the hands, to just the bit that we want to see. So we'll just delete that extra bit, and there it is. Now, give it a little save, and we're going to do the same thing with the rest of her stomach. Alright, here it is. There's the jiggle. That same jiggle from her stomach has been applied to her chest. It's been applied to her whole body. I went ahead and kind of trimmed the initial big impact of the smack off and scooted everything up so that it's still synced up, but it doesn't move as much. That way her head isn't like jiggling all over the place. And obviously the scale aspect is completely removed for like her face and head and that part. That stuff doesn't need to move. It doesn't need to, get bigger and taller and shorter. It just needs to move around a little bit. So that's what I've done. From here, I think all that needs to be done is her face. Her face and some other bits. So here's her face. And as you can see, it moves around just like the rest, but she's not blinking. Her mouths aren't moving. None of that stuff's going right. So we have to do the same thing we did with the hands. We're going to copy paste the movement, and we're going to switch out her features. So let's go down here. On the left, what part are we grabbing? Zoom in again. We're going to do her mouth first. So same thing, mouth. And where is she going to tighten her lips? I guess when she smacks her stomach. So same thing. We're going to grab, let's make that normal sized. Going to grab the razor blade tool and we're going to cut it out. Real simple, nothing much to it. And we're going to do that thing to all of her facial features. Alright, so at this point the visual elements of the video are done. We're done animating. Now we need to get into sound effects. I don't need to go too in-depth about sound effects. If you know how to put all this stuff in a video, you know how to arrange sound effects. It's the same thing as the images. But to get sound effects, I like to go to freesound.org, .com, whatever it is. You know, just look up sound effects, download them. You need to sign up for it. You need to, like, register an account, but it's pretty simple. And they got a bunch of good stuff. And you just take them, download them as an MP3 or whatever file it is, and put them in here. So, you know, you would make a new file, sound effects, a new folder rather, and just import, you know, sound effects. Go on your computer, look up MP3 or whatever it is, and pull up a sound effect. That one wasn't right. You know, any of these, really. And you can just put them in. What am I doing? And you would just drag them into the volume timeline. See down there? Audio 1? Just drag them in. It's no big deal. Just like that. Just like you're doing images, and it'll work exactly the same way. What you can do, though, you can lower the volume, raise the volume, and a tricky little interesting thing you can do is you can adjust the speed to make it go faster, slower, change the pitch, and it'll do all sorts of interesting things. You can go to freesound.org, or you could also go to the YouTube audio library, which will have a bunch of stuff. For me, they don't have enough, like, cartoony sound effects. They have these, like, more cinematic sounding ones, and they tend to be kind of long. But obviously you can also just go on YouTube itself and look up sound effects, like a bounce sound effect, and, you know, grab one, copy the link, and then go to a site like YouTube to MP3 and save it as an MP3. And that works too. You know, whatever you need to do to get sound effects, go ahead and do it. Alright, here we go. I've put some of the sound effects into the video. You can see the different names there. You know, all sorts of things you would need. Just layer them in like images where they need to be. Make sure they sync up. And, you know, just make sure they line up with what's happening visually, and you're good. Play around with the audio, the volume, and you should be good to go. Right, that's perfect. So we're just gonna copy the whole thing, and we're gonna paste it so that it's in line with the animation. Because the animation got copied 3 times for a little loop, so we're gonna do the same thing with the audio. Alright, so once you have your animation fully done, you got the sound effects, the music, everything, it's time to export the whole thing. So you want to make sure that that is selected, the sequence that you've been animating on. Go to File, Export, Media, and it should come up. Now the way that I export, because you need to have a specific setup for it to look good, I use H.264 square pixels. That's not a thing here. The square pixels is somewhere down here. Yeah, it's right there. It's a custom thing. Custom. 1920 by 1080p, 24 frames per second. And, you know, There's tutorials online about which ones specifically to use, because if you just go with the standard MP4, it's going to have all kinds of weird effects and flickering, and it's not going to look right. The colors are going to be wrong. So just look up a more in-depth tutorial about the specific attributes to give to this sort of thing, because it's a sort of thing that once you do it once, you can just save it as a preset. I have it saved here as square pixels. This is right, and once you do it, you can just rely on that forever. And the point is that I don't remember the exact thing. So, but regardless, only other thing I'm going to say is to make sure that you have this little yellow bar at the bottom filled up all the way. That way it exports every bit of your animation. And be sure to check around to make sure that there isn't like a bunch of black space at the end. Because sometimes because it exports this whole chunk here, and sometimes there'll be like a little clip that you forgot to delete all the way out here, and you don't want to export that and get like a video with 50 seconds of black space at the end. So just be aware of that, and when you're ready, click export. It'll take like 10 to 30 minutes depending, maybe an hour if you're doing something really complicated, but it'll export it up just about right, real quick. No big deal. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something. I had fun putting this little tutorial together, or whatever you would call it. Not so much a tutorial as it is a sort of look behind the scenes. Regardless, I hope it helped you if you're trying to get into this stuff. It's really not as complicated as I think I made it sound. Just for the sake of reference, this whole animation took me maybe 3 days to put together. A day to do the storyboard, a day to draw the assets, a day to animate everything. It's not that big of a deal. If you want to get into this stuff, I would highly recommend trying it out. Though I would recommend just keeping things pretty simple. This whole thing might be a little intimidating. If you're too intimidated to do all of this, maybe just start off with something real simple, like a character that's already big just getting bigger, so you're just like making their stomach get bigger or something, which would just be like scaling it up and moving things around. That would be super simple fun, and I hope you had fun watching. Thanks for watching, and I should have some more videos coming to you guys before the year is over. We're getting into the holidays soon, and I'm gonna be excited to get a couple things done for that. So thanks for watching, and see you later.